Hello everybody, it's great to be with you one more time for the past days with Pastor Joel. Well, I did another video called I Object number 1. This is I Object number 2. If you happen to watch the last video and you're watching this one, you'll notice I got the same shirt on. Why? Because I'm running out of shirts. Not true. I just happened to have a chance to do a couple videos back to back here, but this is a different one. And so we're looking at objections to full preterism, and I put them largely into 3 categories: philosophical objections, implicational objections, I don't like the implications if this is true, and exegetical objections, which would be from the scriptures. And so I'm just going to get right into it. You could go back and watch the first video to kind of see where I'm going, but I'm basically working from a these are the kind of objections that come up a lot, and someone had recently put them kind of on a list, so I'm looking at some of those, looking at some other ones, because not surprisingly there are a lot of the same objections that are going to come up over and over. That just makes sense. But let's look at this one. This has to do with hell, and this is, I'm kind of taking some of these objections that have to do with hell and putting them sort of together in my own way, because this is really what you see. One of the objections about hell basically says that if you become a full preterist, you'll no longer believe in hell. Now, first of all, that's not true. I know lots of full preterists, and some of them believe in annihilationism. Some of them believe in the more traditional idea of hell, including eternal conscious torment, and all these people consider themselves full preterists. So first of all, to say that if you become a full preterist, you no longer can believe in traditional hell simply is not true. But even beyond that is the quote-unquote, the problem of whether or not there's a hell. Does that only live in full preterism? And you see this as if, somebody becomes a full preterist, all of a sudden they're wondering about hell. Do you know, even, and I'm not an expert, but do you know, have you even looked at a little bit of church history? Do you realize that all throughout the history of the church, there have been different ideas about hell? And you're going to say that this is somehow because of full preterism? Ridiculous. And that's why I said at the beginning in the last video, and I didn't mean it to be offensive, but some of these objections are just dumb. These are people that just haven't taken even just a few seconds more to think through it. So there are several different views of hell that have been throughout the history of the church, different denominations, different constructs, etc. So is it really surprising that if one happens to embrace something that we label full preterism, that within that paradigm there are also going to be different ideas about hell? Of course not. And so I just, and again, this is just an overview, so I'm not going to take a lot of time to dive in to hell, so to speak. That doesn't sound like a good plan anyway, but you understand what I'm saying. This idea that there are different views of hell, it lives outside of just full preterism. Another thing that is sometimes said is that full preterists no longer believe in any kind of literal Satan. Same type of thing. There are different ideas about Satan, that live beyond just full preterism. But many full preterists I know, and in fact, I don't know all of them clearly. There's more and more, by the way. I keep seeing things that are, it's going away, it's shrinking, nobody's going to believe it in a few years. Interestingly, these are all people that don't like full preterism that are writing this. Let me just give you many examples of why that's not true. But let me just give you one example. If you're not familiar with a Facebook group called Fulfilled Prophecies, I would encourage you to look at that group. The main administrator of that is Dan Maines. I know Dan personally, meaning we've engaged quite a bit. Dan is a rock star, man. Just love Dan. He puts out amazing, I guess you'd call them almost mini sermons, posts, scripture all over the place about a variety of topic, and he's the main one that posts in there. But that group now has he just started it like a little over a year ago, maybe a little longer than that, and it's been growing like crazy. It's up to around 20,000 members, and in that group alone there are a lot of people that come into the group that initially are not full preterists and then are seeing these things and become full preterists. And that's just one small example of what's happening in these groups. But you've got more conferences popping up. I don't engage very much in Facebook, not as much as I used to, because I think it can be a time suck, and sometimes it's a worthy time suck. but a lot of times just arguing back and forth, and nobody's changing their mind, except, and this is important, the people watching and following sometimes do. So it's worth it to do that. But I sometimes like to go in rapture groups as they just pop up on my feed and make comments in there. And when I used to do that, I would just get hammered, to put it lightly, condemned to hell pretty quickly by just saying something like, "Oh, I think these events already happened," and then listing some scriptures. And now when I do that, there's support to coming back saying, "Hey, thanks. It's great to see another fulfilled believer in there. Thanks for sharing that." I mean, so even in there, this is growing, folks, and I think it's growing rapidly. And the truth always comes to the top, and so it's not surprising that happens over time. But another one, getting back to to Satan, the idea that no full preterists believe in literal Satan. I would say more of the full preterists that I know do hold to a literal Satan. Now they would say that literal Satan is not a part of things now, which I would agree with. I mean, in Romans 16:20, I will put Satan under my feet shortly, and whether people see that as literal Satan or the Judaizers or the high priest or whatever that is, because people disagree on that, I would say that those things are no longer present. There's debate about is there any demonic realm, anything happening there? Again, this is just an overview of these things. Again, but to say somebody loses their idea of a traditional Satan because they become a full preterist is myopic. It's specious at best. It's just pretty ignorant. All right, the millennium. This is a tricky one. They squeezed the 1,000-year millennial period into a 40-year period of time. Again, not a bad objection. I don't see people really citing scripture when they say that, except to say that it says 40 years. But here's what's interesting. A lot of people will push back on this. They'll say that we're wrong to take the timestamps. If we take all the other ones literally, why don't we take the 1,000 years literally? Again, there's some logic there. Well, because of where the 1,000 years is in context. Context is king when we read the scripture, remember. Again, I'm not doing this with any notes. I'm not bragging about that. I'm just saying we should have some of these answers at the ready as we're just studying through these things. And I'm wanting to help you have answers for these pushbacks. And so with the millennium, if that comes up, you might say, well, it's in Revelation 20 usually where people are talking about, which a lot of people would agree may be one of the hardest chapters to interpret in perhaps the hardest book of the scriptures. But the fact is, it's within a lot of other things, Satan being chained to the abyss, all these other things that I think most believers, not just preterists, would see this must be symbolic in some way, and that's where that 40 years is listed. And so in that case, we have to think of it as symbolic, and that's why on-mills and post-mills see it as symbolic. Now they see it as a longer number, but do we always have to see it as a longer number? But even beyond that, what I would say is we need to find out what are the particular events of the millennium, and when will those events be fulfilled, and when are they fulfilled? And I think from the full preterist perspective, again, we can see those events as being fulfilled. And so whatever that timeline is we're to say, well, these are the things that were going to take place. They have taken place. Therefore, it must be over, and we must be beyond the millennium. So that's a way to look at that. And I think that's very fair. Let's not get hung up on the precise timing when it's used in an area where everything is so symbolic. But let's look at those events, have they taken place or not, and go at it that way. Whereas the other timestamps are not in apocalyptic settings, and that's why they should be taken literally. All right, we get, this is a really typical one that full preterists just want nothing to do with orthodoxy. Anything orthodox, the traditional views, they just hate it. They hate the creeds. They hate orthodoxy. They hate the church father. You've got to put some vibrato on it. Hate when you say it. That is just ridiculous. Again, these are from me having personal conversations with people. We appreciate the creeds. The creeds get a lot right. But when they don't get something right, do we go with the creed or do we do with the text of Scripture? And interestingly, the most well-known creeds themselves say somewhere in that creed, if it can be shown, the Scripture says something that's in contradiction with these creeds, the creed is wrong and the Scripture is right. Church fathers, there's some helpful things there right now that we're sort of all over the map on a lot. Even sometimes contradicting themselves, and I think we need to see that. But if they've got things right, bravo. But again, are we going to put what they say ahead of Scripture? And, it's funny, like people will use Polycarp as an example because it seems as if he was a disciple of John in some way, and think, well, Polycarp, wasn't what we would call a full preterist, and so wouldn't he know more about what John taught than John did? Again, are we going to go with Polycarp, or are we going to go with the inspired Scriptures and the what I would call the true church fathers? And it shouldn't be a hard sell, should it? And so I'm much more comfortable saying, no, Jesus actually really did know what he believed. The apostles really did know what they believed because they were taught from him, and they said nothing but what the Old Testament prophets taught and thought, and they know what they believed, and maybe Polycarp misunderstood some things. I'm much more comfortable with that than saying the Scriptures that all Christians would say have authority and are inspired by God and are inerrant. Well, once we get to the church fathers figured it out just a little bit better. I mean, that's just weird. That's whacknut, right? Crazy. All right. Anti-Semitism. Now, I'll tell you something here. I do think that there are some full preterists who ironically focus way, way, way too much on the nation of Israel and are hyper-focused on Israel, and just like they would be so critical, these same people, of Christian Zionism and dispensationalists for understanding Israel incorrectly, they're just as hyper-focused on Israel. It's kind of weird. It can lead to some conspiracy theories, and personally, I don't like it. All right? Whether they're anti-Semitic or not, I don't want to make that call. But if they're anti-Semitic, some full preterists, does that make full preterism not true? Well, of course not. It's just it's a dumb argument, and there are some people that make that argument. And then another one that comes up a lot is the new heavens and new earth. Well, if this is the new heavens and new earth, it sucks, is basically the objection. And when we look around and we look outside, there's problems, there's still suffering. I'm sorry, but do you not know, those who make those objections, that in Revelation 21, when from the main New Testament text, and when we're looking at the new heavens and the earth, that sin still exists in the new heavens and in the new earth? I mean, this is a thing people don't know. I didn't know. I read those texts, but I haven't put it together. There is sin. There is physical suffering. There is physical death in the new heavens and new earth. So are we to expect, if we're expecting the new heavens and earth to be perfect in a true sense, a physical sense rather, I should say, of no more tears, no more dying, then you're not understanding Scripture. You're just not. Because the Scriptures teach that those things are still present in the new heavens and the new earth. Again, and the objection to that kind of goes along with that as well. All you full preterists just want to focus on the spiritual and deny the physical. No, it's not denying the physical. It's just agreeing with Jesus. Okay, he who believes in me shall never die. Are you going to die physically? Well, I think so. I think there's a good chance. So Jesus clearly wasn't talking about that. And the fact is that the Scripture does put the spiritual above the physical. It just does. That's why you've got this old covenant. Moses is a mediator tied to the physical temple, the physical priesthood, etc. That all gets obliterated by God to the point that it should be obvious. Hello! That's all completely disappeared. And now we've got a mediator, Jesus Christ, spiritual temple, spiritual priesthood, all the rest. So the whole book of Hebrews is going from how in this new covenant is better than the first. So yes, the spiritual should be elevated above the physical. But we're not denying the physical. But again, this idea that the new heavens and new earth is going to be a perfect place, that's misunderstanding Scripture. And what do people typically say that make that objection? Well, I look around and I see these things with my eyes happening, all this suffering. Did Jesus not say, Luke 17, do not look over here or over there for the kingdom? Like the point is, you're not going to see it physically. But what does Paul talk about? It's essentially the fruit of the Spirit. Peace, righteousness, joy, kindness, patience, long-suffering. Those are the things, those are the traits of the kingdom, and they are spiritual realities. So if you want to accuse me of, well, you're just focused on the spiritual things. Sign me up. I vote yes to those spiritual things because that is what Jesus focused on. It's what the apostles focused on. So that's I object number 2. We may come back to these videos at some other point. This I object series. I hope it's been helpful to you. And tip for this video, Pastor Joel saying bye for now.